joy today to welcome Piero and
Sì, ma non
the
si sente niente.
Mastroberardino team.
Nobody's talking.
Sì, sta parlando. Aspetta,
He's
aspetta.
not. Where do you see him talking?
Okay, so
Could that please put your thank you.
okay, so just very quickly, just administratively, please put all of your computers and phones on mute. Also want everyone to know that this call, Teams call, is being recorded so that we can edit and play back in the future. We can utilize this for our distributor launches and meetings. And for anybody who is unavailable here today, we'll be able to watch it as well. As I was saying, this gives me incredible pleasure and joy today to welcome Piero Mastroberardino to Tao Family Selections and his amazing team. So much joy that almost shaking here, because this has been many years effort, and Mark will go into all of that in a minute. I'm just so proud to be here today with all of you and welcome you to our family and to our company. And I look forward to an amazing day here together. And with that, I will pass it over to Mark.
Thank you, Diego. And it's incredible to be here with everybody. I'm glad we have our organization from all around the country here, as well as our Independence Wine and Spirits team. So this is a joint meeting with both the Taub Family Selections team and Independence Wine and Spirits, mustering our group from around the country to talk about what we love most, and that is fine wine. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to say and reiterate, since it's been a little bit since we talked with you, that I am incredibly proud of this team for their hard work, energy, and dedication through this crisis, and going the extra yard through everything that I know all of you are dealing with. Having family first and foremost and top of mind through this process, each and every one of you have put forth an amazing effort to ensure our business continues to thrive, that we continue to move forward and defy the obstacles that are being put before us each and every day. We know that the on-premise world has basically changed overnight, and that when we look out at the marketplace, we see many of our friends in the restaurant business all around the country not open and not functioning in business as usual. Many of them are finding new ways to work and operate in this environment, defying the odds and ensuring that they look towards a better tomorrow. And I think our organization is doing an exemplary job of making sure that we're uncovering every aspect of business that's out there, looking at how we capitalize on new opportunities in retail for our incredible array of fine wines, and continue to work the ever-changing system to defy the odds and ensure we're improving our business. To show you today that we are operating in a business as usual fashion, and that we're not letting the fact that we're not able to be out in the field every day in the same way that we have in the past, we're proud more than ever to bring in an incredible producer into our family of wines. The Mastroberardino family is in a class of its own when it comes to representing the area of Campania. Campania is a very, very special place, different from anywhere else in Italy. And you're going to hear from today from Piero, who can tell you more about this area than anyone else can. The Mastroberardino family started in Campania 26 years before our country was founded in 1750. That's an amazing, amazing statistic. It's incredible when you can have that many generations of history in defining and creating what an area represents. Today, there are many wineries from the region, but only one that can talk about the birth of Taurasi, the history and legacy of Greco and Fiano, and just how the region came to being. Mastroberardino defines that from its history, from its early on settings, and today still represents the most important winery in the region for displaying the quality and understanding of what each of the sub-appellations mean in this area. As you know, Campania is an incredible white wine region and an incredible red wine region, which is something you don't find necessarily all over Italy. It's something very particular with so many special appellations that are phenomenal. And we're going to really take the time today with Piero and his team to walk you through what they all represent, what they stand for, what you're supposed to gain and feel from these incredible terroirs, and their place in the world. I'm totally excited to have Piero and his team. We have Giancarlo Calisi, his Chief Operations Officer, Giuseppe Calabrese, Chief Marketing Officer, Lucrezia Bensodina. I don't think I got that totally right. But the export manager, and Massimo Dorenzo is technical team, the chief enologist. So we have a great team surrounding Piero that gets this incredible winery, the reputation, prestige, and ongoing support that's needed. It's truly a treasure trove of history when you get to visit Mastroberardino, and we hope that all of you will have that opportunity before too long, because you really feel as if you're walking through history and getting an understanding of the very roots of the area, how it came to life, the culture that surrounds it, the food and the wine, and how they all come together are met right there at the heart of Mastroberardino. I couldn't be more... Excuse me, I have a phone call. Can you believe this? No, I'm not going to take it, but I'm sure everybody heard that. Mastroberardino represents so many incredible opportunities for us as we step out and take a look at what the opportunity is for Campania. As you know, we as an organization have had some experience in Campania, and that was with a brand that we will not name today. But I have to tell you, from the onset, although we did have much success with that brand, it turned out that that was a second choice. And at a point in time, at an earlier life and an earlier discussion. Ricardo Lignaro joined our organization in 1999 after the breakup of Palace Brands. And at that point in time, I had the pleasure to go down to Mastroberardino for the very first time with my father and with Dennis Delaney as we toured the area and got our first view of what Campania was. At that point in time, the family was working with another group of wineries, and collectively they went in another direction as we had a fairly different portfolio. And over time, they've each kind of gone their own path and taken their own direction over the years. So at an earlier point, we really wanted to get together. So bringing Piero and the Mastroberardino family into Taub Family Selections marks something that we've been striving to do for well over 20 years, and it's very exciting to welcome his incredible family to ours. Piero is married to a beautiful woman, Tiziana, and has two incredible daughters, Camilla and Serena, who I've had the pleasure to meet as well. He has many incredible interests, and I'm not going to steal his thunder and get in the way of letting him describe who he is, what he does, and the position that he sits in. But let me tell you clearly that he is one of the most respected men in wine in Italy from every facet. He's president of the Gruppi Federvini. He's also been the president of the Italian Association of Grande Vini, which incorporates some of the best-known producers like our Coldorcia, Gaia, and Sassicaia, and Antinori. So thought of amongst the creme de la creme of the most exquisite wineries from all over Italy. And he's accomplished in so many other ways as an economist, a novelist, a poet, a painter, a golfing enthusiast. He really runs the gamut of taking life to the fullest, displaying his passion and interest in so many great things. And at the top of his list is making sure the family's history moves on into the future and ensuring the Mastroberardino name, a name that is unrivaled from the area and speaks to the predominance of the family. They are the maestros from this region, is this winemaking effort. And for those soccer fans out there, it's all about Naples. So from Piero's standpoint, so much to display, so much to share, and so much excitement and joy to transfer to all of you that we're going to let this presentation move forward. Before we introduce Piero himself, I'm going to let Marco say a few words on behalf of our organization. Marco, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, team. Good afternoon to the Mastroberardino team in Italy. Like everyone else, I am extremely excited. This is a great day. This is the day that completes a circle that started, as Mark said, 20 years ago. We are going to have a fantastic session. I just want to frame it for 2 minutes to give everybody's context. First and foremost, I invite you to reference the 2 documents that we have sent out, the Heart and Soul and the KPI and Sales Strategy. Throughout the presentation, we will share the screen in the certain sections that are relevant to the conversation at that point. And at the same time, the presentation is going to follow the agenda that I sent. So Riccardo Legnaro will tell his relationship and story with the family and his experience right after I pass him the stage. And then Piero Mastroberardino will lead us through the core of the presentation, which will touch history, will touch geography of the area, will touch the wines, we will do a live tasting. And all of this is going to be interactive if we want it to be. After that, Brian Cronin will give us a master sommelier context of what Mastroberardino represents in the fine wine world. And we'll close with a Q&A session. So it's going to be open. I'll just moderate, but we're looking forward to hear. And the question can be addressed to anybody. It can be addressed to Piero and his team, of course. It can be addressed to a marketing question. It could be a portfolio question. We're all open. So without adding any more, I will pass the stage to Riccardo Legnaro.
Can everybody see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here, and great, and at least since all these things started to have the whole group together. You know, Mastroberardino, I've been a little bit somewhat associated with Mark now for the better part of 30 years, and today it truly is. It's not just a partnership. This is really the celebration of a marriage. I tell you, this has been the longest engagement in wine history. You know, we've been, as Marco was saying, talking about over 21 years ago, 22 years ago, and even in the middle of the relationship we had with the other winery in Campania, we never really lost touch with each other. The conversation was always there. Courtesies were there. The get-together were always there. You know, we knew that we were made for each other, and it finally did happen. I cannot really tell you how happy I really am. Piero and the team is going to go through, you know, most of the presentation, the wine. I just want to give you a little bit. I just want to talk to you a few minutes about Antonio Mastroberardino, Piero's dad. that I had really a good fortune to meet several times. And this does not really want to be an eulogy. It really wants to be a late tribute a little bit, but also to make you really understand what Antonio really represented for the region and me as well. Why not? Antonio was really truly the beacon, the defender of the wine tradition in the area. When I really do think about him, he was really the all these wine, the archaeological wine, because that's what they really are. We're really going back over 2,000 years ago. Yeah, I always saw Antonio as the Indiana Jones, if you will, of the wine industry and wine industry in general. Every time that I would see him, yes, he would really talk to him in Italian, but I always thought that he was by himself. When he was by himself, he was really thinking in Greek and Latin. Really a true historian. I have no doubt that if he would not make wine in life, he probably would have been a history professor or historian. Let's put it that way. Campania region and history were always in his mind. He taught me about Pliny the Elder, the original robber Parker of Roman Empire. Byron from Goethe, and he was really truly a classic person. The area, and that's what I really is the Mastroberardino and family really comes from. Generally speaking, the industry after the war, especially, as you can imagine, the area after World War II, and also the bout that they really did have with phylloxera, which was really very, very important to the area. It was just a matter of economic. The inner thread of Italian culture, which is always having wine with every meal. It was really a beverage. Everybody after the war really started to emphasize, quantity over quality, which was a thought of Italian winemaking overall. Everybody really went for the higher yield wine and more commercially sellable. Trebbiano and Sangiovese at first, and then Cab and Chardonnay. Antonio really, he was really the true pioneer. What Mark was really saying a little bit earlier, there are many wineries right now. At the time, honestly, I cannot really think of more than a dozen of winery, if that, when I started, that were actually producing this grape variety. But he strayed the straight and narrow, and he always persisted with this thing. And can you imagine, after World War II, the courage that really took for him to really carry on with his vision, and the difficulty that I'm sure he really did had. And this is an area in a nation that up to a point did not really fully understand fine wine. He really brought this grape variety out of obscurity. And in the case really of Fiano di Avellino, it was even more than that. I remember him telling me that, he found out there were a couple of vines growing wild in a field, and he started working on it. And I remember him telling me that on the first harvest, he actually produced 20 bottles. That's all it really was. I cannot really think of a single winemaker that single-handedly really influenced the region as much as it did. The region and Italy really holds them, truly a debt of gratitude. I worked with him the streets in New York City, and it was really the first year that I actually worked with my previous company, I remember it was a spring. I started with this other company sometime in February or March. So it was really one of the first work with that I really ever had. And I was a little bit, because I really did not really have a lot of experience in And we went to, I only had one appointment, I remember, downtown in Little Italy, a place called Georgine Carmela, which was really a very, very famous restaurant at the time. We went in, and I really did not have that many stops. And as we walked out, we stopped by we went inside a restaurant called La Mela, I remember. And the owner of La Mela, as soon as he saw him, honestly, I think, if I remember well, I think he almost genuflected just to seeing Antonio. He was not really a salesperson per se, but he really, I think, all the Ristorateur and Neapolitan, but not just Neapolitan, because Mastroberardino even then was really a winery that really transcend the regionality of, Italians. They always like to buy from their own region. They always like to buy from their own. But for him, the scope was really very, very, very wide. And, when they come in, when he came in, it was just like they really admire and respected what Antonio was really able to accomplish, and in the way that he accomplished it. And he really was a step above everybody else, even during those presentations. I had a pleasure of visiting with him in Campania a couple of times as well. He took me to see Pompeii a couple of times. And, it was one of those occasions that he actually mentioned the vines that were really found in Pompeii. And I think already he was already thinking of the wine that eventually did became Villa dei Misteri 20 years later. Antonio unfortunately passed away in 2004 in January, and we were all very, very, very sad about. And in New York, a bunch of old salespeople and a few importers, a couple of importers, we kind of really decided to do a luncheon to honor Antonio. And Piero and Camilla actually flew in especially for this luncheon, which we did at San Domenico. And the thing was, everybody really brought in a bottle of something special from their cellar. I remember actually Piero, if I remember correctly, brought in some 68 and 77 Reserva, and as well as some younger Radici. But there were Fianos from the 80s. Someone brought in a Taurasi of 59. And I tell you, all the wines, even 20, 25, 30 years later, they were all impeccable. These are wines that will last, and they will last, honestly, forever. 68, I had the pleasure or the good fortune to taste a bottle, last year. It lost none of the vigor and fruit. It's still all there. These were wines. This is wine that is really very, very special. Just to show you a little bit also what how Antonio really was, because he really was a classic person. Mannerism was really very, very important to him. And I remember a story that Charles Cicolone is a researcher / wine writer here in New York, for people who don't know him. He was telling me a funny story about Antonio the first time that he met him. Antonio, being the ultimate gentleman that he is, went to pick him up at the airport. This was really late at night. I think it was around midnight or something of the sort. And he was taking him to Atripalda. Atripalda is fairly well serviced right now, but there is a freeway that goes straight, and there is not a problem. But in those days, it was a pretty dark and long and winding road. And in the mannerism of Antonio, really did not allow to talk and not to look at the other person in the face. That would have been bad manner. So basically, for the 45 minutes, hour that it took from the airport to the winery, he was talking to Charles and driving at the same time. But every time that Charles would talk, or he would talk, he would actually face him. He would turn around the vehicle from from driving and talk to him face to face. So needless to say, Charles needed to have a change of undergarment as soon as he got to Atripalda. It was really a funny story that it really shows a little bit of the person that he really was. In conclusion, really, we've been looking for a vehicle or a re-entry in the region, and I'm happy to say that Italy is a Ferrari. We have everything that we could really ask for a producer. Market awareness already, the qualities, which is really impeccable. I mean, honestly, these are really very, very classic wine. Yes, there is something a little bit more because of the winemaking technique really has changed, but taste this wine. This wine, in relation to a lot of the other wine, they really do retain much more than any other winery that classic style, that varietal that you really can taste. Press, and rightly so, has just been tremendous. And great packaging. The packaging really has always been very, very nice. And also what it really does give you, and I hope I was able to communicate this, a little bit of place, a sense of place and history within the Italian panorama that I can give you in 10 minutes. For me, Italy is an opportunity. This opportunity we represent is really kind of really back to the future. Could not really be happier of our relationship. And Piero, I am so looking forward to help our team to bring our relationship to the next level. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Grazie, Riccardo. Piero, the stage is yours.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the words that Mark said before about our families, the fact that I remember the visit of Mark and his father to the winery back to the late 90s, and it was a great friendship. I mean, in the business, people from wine business and have always been great friends, apart from their business relationship. And this is probably the biggest evidence of that. And then I'm, of course, pleased and also emotional about the words that Riccardo dedicated to my father. And I remember Riccardo when I was very young, because my first trips to United States were during the period of Palace Brands company, importing company, and at that time I was at a high school, and so my first trips around the United States were together with Riccardo, with Philip Di Berardino, and with many friends. Many of them are still in the business, so I've got many friends from those beautiful times and great experiences that I had in this big country that is the United States. I must say that yes, the family has a very long history, of course, and at the same time tries to keep this very strong link between the past and the future. So what we are living today, our present, is first of all a linkage, an historical linkage, to give a reason for the wines to be here and to go on expressing, bringing the message of an extraordinary territory like the ancient Campania Felix of the Romans. So that's why I decided last year to dedicate myself to a project that is the opening of a family museum, the MIMA, that is the museum that I dedicated to the memory of my father, first of all, because it's true what Riccardo said about my father. My father was very passionate about history, a great collector of books. We got about 1,200 of very ancient books going back to 1500 in the family patrimony, and they are extraordinary. They witness the big tradition and history of this country, and of course they are very helpful also in understanding more and more about our roots, the radici of our work. So I'm very proud to introduce this seminar with a few slides that are dedicated to have an idea of the history, not only of Mastroberardino family, even if all these documents concern our history, our family history, but they also are passages that give us the possibility to understand more about wine history and about history in general, as you will see. I will be quite fast showing some of these documents because it would be really too long, but I will try to focus a little bit on some aspects that are, in my opinion, important to understand more about things that usually are not told in our everyday life about wine business. But in my opinion, they are interesting for everybody to be present and active in communication of wine. So, as you can see, the museum is dedicated to the memory of these three great men of my family. Antonio, that is my father, and then my grandfather, Michele, and then his father, Angelo, my great-grandfather. These three people were two, I would say, revolutionary men. Each of them was capable in his generation to restart after problems, after relevant issues. They were able to have a vision of the future and to give this land, when I say land, I talk about Italy, not only Campania, as you will see, to give this land an important future in the wine business. So we worked in this museum with three different halls that are dedicated to different periods. The first hall is dedicated to the period that starts from 1700 and goes up to 1914, right before the World War I. And then we will have two more halls that will be dedicated to the period of 14 to 32, and then 1932 up to 1945. This is the percourse of the museum. So this is the first document that talks about the first purchase of land that we have documented in the family. It's in 1735, and it talks about the Prince Niccolò di Gesualdo, that was a descendant of the famous Carlo Gesualdo, the Madrigalist, and he was Marquis in Santo Stefano and was the owner of a land in Santo Stefano that came in the property of my family at that time. And now we are right at the beginning of the domination of the Borboni family in our region. And so then we follow with these documents all the kings of the Borboni domination period. So then we have a document here that is from 1851. As you can see, you have Michele Mastroberardino, son of Vito Mastroberardino, that is buying, again, some land. And in 1851, if you read on the top of the document, you will see Regno delle due Sicilie, the reign of the two Sicilies, Ferdinando II, per la grazia di Dio, grace of God and the will of the nation, is the king of the reign of the two Sicilies, and is also the Duke of Parma, Piacenza, and heritage Prince of Tuscany. And so, I mean, this is the heritage of the Borboni domination in the area. Then we have other documents that talk about the Savoia domination. So here we are in 1866, and in 1866 we have the period of the reign of Italy, as it was just born in 1861. So these are the first years of the King Vittorio Emanuele II, that was the first king of Italy from the Savoia family. Then we have the second king of Italy, that is Umberto I of the Savoia family again. And here, these are all documents concerning the patrimony of the family, the territories, the pieces of lands that were bought in this century by the family. So this is Umberto I, that was the second king of Italy from the Savoia family as well. And then we have 1878 is also the year in which my family starts exporting wine to Europe, and then in the late 1800s we start exporting wines to United States, as you will see in other documents. So then we have, this is a letter of the family. Here we have the letterhead of the family at that period between the two brothers, Angelo and Giuseppe Mastroberardino. It's 1885, and one is at the winery in Atripalda and the other is in Rome, because they founded a company in Rome in order to arrange the shipments abroad. So they were a kind of pioneer in that period, because they had the vision of opening foreign markets for Italian wines. And this is the family of Angelo Mastroberardino, my great-grandfather, and at this back is Michele, my grandfather. So this man was capable to start a new renaissance for Italian wines, because he was able to bring these wines in several foreign countries. And the King of Italy, this is the third King of Italy, Vittorio Emanuele III, again from the Savoia family, and he appointed my great-grandfather Angelo Mastroberardino, great-grandfather, with this title of Cavaliere dell'Ordine della Corona of the Crown of Italy. Then we have, at the beginning of 1900s, we have the first participation to big wine challenges around the world, mainly in Europe. So we have London, Paris, and many other places here in Europe, mainly. And this is the Crystal Palace in London, 1906, that awards the Cavalier Angelo Mastroberardino from Atripalda for wines with a diploma, Grand Prix with gold medal. You can see many of these awards that were I mean, the Wine Spectator at the time, probably. Many of them are in our exhibition in the museum. Then we have some documents talking about the war in Africa in 1911. This is for the period in which Italy was conquering Tripolitania, so the Libyan territory. These are some pictures from African campaign. Then we have in 1912, this is a letter that my grandfather Michele sends to his father Angelo, describing his trips to the United States. Starting from the beginning of 1900s, Michele Mastroberardino becomes the foreign ambassador for the family, so becomes the person in charge of the export markets. And so he comes to the United States several times. In this letter, he says to his father, I thought to make a tour of visits all around North America, in the main cities of North America. The tour will be the following: New York, Boston, Montreal, Utica, Syracuse, Buffalo, Toronto, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Chicago, St. Louis, New Orleans, and then New York. And he says to his father, this travel is going to last about 20 days. It's going to cost about $250 up to $300, all included. And he's asking permission to his father to spend this money for this trip, visiting new accounts. So this gives the idea of how was the wine business for these pioneers at that time. It's much similar, very close to what we do now, what we do currently in order to promote our wines. This was exactly the same lifestyle of the wine people more than 1 century ago. These are the funerals of my great-grandfather, Angelo Mastroberardino. And so from this moment, we have the second period of our museum that is dedicated to the period of 1914 up to 1932. That is the period in which Michele Mastroberardino, after his father's death, is in charge of the main part of the business, and he goes on working on the internationalization of the company. It's of course a very hard period because we have, first of all, the World War I. That is a period in which economy goes down, but they are very strong in export at that time. This is a letter from Zurich, from Switzerland, 1914. This is from Paris, in France, again, 1914. Then in 1915, Italy goes in the World War I. So we got letters that comes from the war zone, Zona di Guerra, 1915. Then some pictures from the family at the time. And this is another interesting document. This is the first document that we found of an agreement for import of our wines in the United States. This is a company that is based in New York, and the importer name is Louis Achard. And these guys in this contract says that he has the obligation of exclusivity about all southern Italy. So Mastroberardino will be the only company represented from all the southern part of the country. And then there's another clause, another article in the contract that says that this company has the obligation of keeping the producer, the Mastroberardino family, always updated about all the condition of the market, the needs of the customers, the prices and quality of the wines of the competitors, and to take care of all the needs of the accounts in order to develop better and better the business of Mastroberardino wines in US market. And this is very interesting because it's the first modern style of contract that we have in the family with commitments, with the marketing pressure and so on. This is the opening of South America, the Argentina market. This is a letter that is sent by my family to the Argentinian ambassador in order to have support in opening the business. And we got many documents of this trip that my grandfather Michele used to do in South America in the early 20s. So this is a letter from Buenos Aires in February 1921. And this is the boat, Principe di Udine. And this is a picture of my grandfather Michele on the boat Principe di Udine during the travel. This is the telegram that he sends to the family in June 1921 when he's coming back from Argentina through Brazil, back through Gibraltar and then back to Italy. This is his passport in that period, so a passport that he used for European countries because for outside Europe he needed a different authorization, but this is for all the visits all around Europe. He was really a man that loved to travel almost everywhere, and this was his main work, was to promote the wines abroad. This is his car in the 20s. This is the first picture that I have of my father, Antonio Mastroberardino, 5 months old, in 1928, sitting on this lion that was killed by my grandfather during the trip in Argentina in 1921. And I've been on this lion skin as well, because this has been in the family up to the earthquake of 1980. Then after the earthquake, we got several damages, and among them, we also lost this lion skin. This is part of the family, the sisters of my father Antonio. Again, my father Antonio. This is a letter from Libya, Benghazi, in 1929, and we got plenty of these documents. I will go fast through these, but it's very interesting to understand what was the width of interests in the foreign markets. These are the importers from Rangoon in the Anglo-Indian Empire in the 30s. Here you have the Royal Consulate of Italy in Manila, Philippines, for the importation of wines during the year 1929. Here we got a letter from Copenhagen asking for the wines and describing the situation of the market. And this is another very important document. In 1931, we got the ancestor of the SAQ from Quebec. It was called the Quebec Liquor Commission, and is sending a letter to my family in order to request the offer of the products. Then we have the third part of our museum that is dedicated to the maturity of Michele Mastroberardino, my grandfather. And in this period, we have the first information about the change of the condition in the United States. So we got this document in 1932 that is announcing the change of the rules about the prohibition. Prohibition started, as you know, in 1919. So in that period, we still have shipments made to United States, but it's not as it was in the past. So in 1932, we have the reopening of the channels of distribution of the wines. So this we have plenty of these letters of importers and distributors asking for the wines. So this guy says, "Dear sirs, we are firmly convinced that it's only a matter of time before the sale of wines will be permitted in the United States of America. As we are interested in obtaining the exclusive sale agency of your wine products for this country and its territories, we shall be pleased to know whether this agency is open and whether an arrangement with our firm would interest you." And it says, "Our organization is equipped and prepared for immediate large-scale merchandising and distribution in the event of any sudden moderation of the Prohibition Act, and we can assure you of a most substantial and important sale of your products in this country. If you're interested, we shall be glad to have our representative sail for Paris this summer to discuss terms and to complete all other arrangements for what we have full faith will prove to be a most valuable addition to your business. In this respect, will you kindly send us at your earliest convenience your complete list of bottled and bulk wines?" So this is another very important document of the change of distribution of wines in US in the 30s. And then the next year was in 1933. We have many other documents like this. This is another company requesting a representation of our wines, and it's and the documents comes from Texas. The name of the company is California Grape Products. And it says, "We presume that you are familiar with the fact that we anticipate an early modification or the repeal of the Volstead law in this country, which will enable us to again sell wine. With this thought in mind, we would like to be prepared and are writing you with a view to having you submit us anything you may have to offer in this line," and so on. And it says that they are organized to receive wines through Houston and Galveston in Texas or New Orleans in Louisiana, and then ask, of course, about the wines, about also asks about the packaging of the products and so on. So, I mean, I think that it's extremely important to have a view of these documents, because it helps a lot to understand what was wine business 1 century ago. Not much different from the one that we are living now. This is very important also to make people understand what is the relevance of this business in social and economic life. It's from the Canale di Suez. And then we got shipments made in the major ports of Africa, still in the 30s, 1934. This is in the fastest period in Italy. Then we got shipments made through Asia, Singapore, Bangkok, Manila, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Kobe, Yokohama, this is Japan, and then Qingdao, Tianjin in China, Vladivostok. I mean, so many different destinations in Asia. And this is for North Europe. I mean, in the 30s, we have a family from the mountains in the inland of Campania in a small region called Irpinia that are shipping wines in all the continents, all over the world. This is again from Africa, Khartoum in Sudan. This is from Egypt, an Italian guy running business in Egypt. And this is Asmara, again from the Italian African colonies of the 30s of last century. We got shipments of the red wine Taurasi Extra to Haiti with the certificate of origin of the wine, Vino Rosso Taurasi Extra, with the analysis from the lab. And this is the shipment of the Greco di Tufo to Albania, Tirana. This is Malta, the opening of another small but very interesting market in 1940. We are in the World War II. Then this is the declaration of the war. So Italy goes into World War II in 1940, and the government asks the companies to give a list of all their workers in order to be sure that they have control of the population that must go through the army. And then we got documents during the World War II. These are documents from the occupied countries of Europe, occupied by the Nazis. So we got, this is from Oslo, Norway. We got all these documents that are written in German, and that bring the seals of the German domination and occupation. This is from Prague, Czech Republic, and so on. I mean, documents are really a lot. I mean, there's a lot to see and to visit in the winery. The museum is in the winery, and I'm confident and very proud that this kind of contribution from my family can give you all the support to learn more about wines, not only about our wines, but about the wine culture in general. This is just a curiosity. In the period of the war, when the Americans came against the Nazis, and this is a general pass that my father, Antonio Mastroberardino, that was a little more than a kid at the time, received in order to travel around the regions of southern Italy, from Atripalda to Brindisi in Apulia. And that's for the historical part of the seminar. Let's go to the region. Let's talk about the Campania region. Just briefly about Campania, I know that you know well the region and you know the appellations because you've been in touch with many of these wines, but let me tell you a few words. Not many people realize that we are in the middle of the mountains, as I was saying before, so it's a very peculiar condition of our territory in terms of microclimate and altitude. And of course, this region is very well known for the coast, for Napoli, Pompeii, Amalfi Coast, Sorrento, Positano, Capri, Ischia. I mean, these are all beautiful, beautiful places on the coast. The Mount Vesuvio, of course. But if you travel just 40-45 minutes far from the coast in the inland, you go all the way up to the mountain area where the vineyards are in a very high altitude. They go up to 700 meters of elevation, starting from 350 up to 700 meters. And we got a situation that is very unusual for this latitude. So we've got an environment that is very cold in winter. We got snow in the vineyards every year. And this is extremely helpful for the character of these wines that have a very strong personality and also gives a contribution to the ageability. That's why we are able to show wines that have a very, very long aging and that are go on and on expressing beautiful, beautiful things decade per decade. So what is very important for us is the fact that wine must be thought in the long run. None of these wines has a problem of aging. When we have white wines from our region that are 20, 25 years old, we are still enjoying beautiful and fresh wines. And of course, this is an opportunity because we have the possibility to show wines that are fresh and fruity and a little more approachable, but also we have the possibility to enhance these characters working on the winemaking process and on the viticultural side. So we have a huge variety of options in terms of production in order to get a width of our range of wines and to have so many different opportunities of pairing these wines with food. This is another important character of these wines. They are typically food wine, so they give their best in the food pairing. But back to the geographic aspects, Campania region has two completely different viticultural situations. The one that is close to Mount Vesuvio on the coast has lower altitude, has different soils because the soils are very rich in ash, are darker, and have a strong presence of minerals. These wines are extremely pleasant. They don't have the very high acidity of the wines from the inland, from the mountains, but they are extremely intriguing, delicate, and very well balanced. And of course, they made the success of the appellation of Lacrima Grisi del Vesuvio that you well know. In the inland, we have a completely different situation. We got different soils, we got different altitude, and the climate, of course, is much different. In this 50 kilometers of distance, you can have 7 to 8 Celsius degrees of difference in temperature. That means completely another region on the climate side, completely different. And so the wines are really, a different expression of the region. So when you talk about Campania, you have to keep in mind that there are two different regions, the coast and the mountainside. On the coast, we got, of course, the Vesuvio wines. We got the Pompeii area that was very famous, of course, for the wine culture 2000 years ago. In the inland, we have the three most prestigious appellations that are the three DOCGs of the region, Greco di Tufo, Taurasi, and Fiano di Avellino. We also have other appellations in the region. We got, of course, the Sannio DOC, where we produce the Falanghina, but the three most prestigious wines are Greco di Tufo, Fiano di Avellino, and Taurasi. Another very important thing to point out is the platform of grape varietals that we have in the region, because this region remained, due to my father deep thought, he remained strongly linked to the tradition of the ancient grapes, thinking that ancient grapes would have become the most modern frontier of wine culture. And this is exactly what has happened in the current years, because people are looking more and more for wines that are a little unusual compared to the generality of the wines produced by the international grape varietals. So more and more people are looking for wines that express something different. This is a big opportunity for this region because in this area we didn't have any contamination of other grape varietals coming from outside of the region. So we have the possibility today to focus on each area, each appellation, and in the same appellation we can have different expression of the same grape having different exposure, different sites. The family today owns 14 big estates and then some small vineyards located in different in other different villages, but 14 big estates that go up to 250 hectares totally of property. And these estates are located in the most interesting sites of the three big appellations of the DOCG, Taurasi, Greco di Tufo, and Fiano di Avellino. And so we have the possibility to experiment a lot, putting together each of these grapes with different terroirs inside the appellation area. So we can have quite a wide range of expression of each of these wines, and that's why we have the possibility to have a wide range divided in different lines. Each of the lines of our wines express a different approach to viticulture and winemaking. So each of the lines has a different concept behind the wines. We'll discuss about this later on. Talking about the estates, we got many estates located in the Taurasi area, many estates located in the Greco di Tufo and in the Fiano di Avellino. And as I was saying, what is very important today is to make people outside understand that there is not just one Taurasi, there is not just one Greco di Tufo, one Fiano di Avellino. You can work in the terroir, in these three different terroirs. You can work differently and get a different expression of these wines. That is probably the most interesting part of the job that we are showing through the different lines of our wines. Coming to another topic, I would like to say a few words about sustainability. That has become in the recent years a very important topic for us. We have been working hard in the last decade in order to have the first certification of sustainability of the whole process of viticulture and winemaking inside the winery. So we were the first Italian winery to get this certification from the Italian Ministry of the Environment. And this certification concerns all the wines, all the production. Inside the company, we have different experiments on sustainability. So we compare different protocols. We got this protocol of sustainability that is applied to all the estates, but in some estates then we experiment the organic protocol, and in some others we do different studies in order to have a kind of a lab and a database that can be compared on the different protocols in terms of efficiency and impact on the environment of the different protocols currently existing in winemaking and viticulture. And this is also something that makes us extremely proud, because we are doing a very strong investment in this territory. All my investments in viticulture are concentrated in this region. I'm not aiming at expanding in different regions just to catch an opportunity of business. We think that in the wine business, nature and culture and social life go together. So if you want to produce a great wine, you must be part of the environment. You cannot produce great wines everywhere. You cannot be the social part of everybody in the world, of every environment, I mean. And so I think that this is another very important issue. You must be aware of what happens in a territory in all the months and days of the year, in order to understand what is the best way to get the best expression from each of these territories. That's why we are going on focusing investments in this area, and these investments are going on year per year. Just in the last 18 months, we were able to buy new estates for about 35 hectares. That is quite big in a small region like ours. Then we can move to the portfolio. So I would like to ask Marco if I can go on talking about the portfolio, or he wants to introduce.
Sure, Piero. I think I am going to share my screen and just highlight the portfolio strategy for 1 second that everybody has in front of them. And we'll just touch 2 seconds on it. And then as we go and discuss the wines, we'll revisit if necessary.
Okay. If anybody has to do some questions about the first part of the seminar, otherwise we can go on explaining about the wines.
Perfect. I think my screen should be up.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. So, team, you have the portfolio pyramid in the documents, and I'm just going to spend 2 minutes to do a general recap of the 2 pyramids for the Mastroberardino portfolio. So, what we have is 2 different pyramids for 2 reasons. One, it's a pyramid for general market. The other one is a pyramid for on-premise and off-premise national accounts, and that includes the Mastro line. This first pyramid that you're seeing right now has the 4 tiers. We have agreed and established with the winery that our efforts will be focused on building distribution with I Classici line. I Classici line is composed of 5 different wines: Falanghina del Sannio, Fiano d'Avellino, Greco di Tufo, Aglianico from Irpinia, and Lacrima Rosa Rosé. 3 of these wines were never previously imported by Winebo. Therefore, there is no price history. There is no, I guess, anything that can be in the way of them. The next tier up, and the volumetric aspect of the portfolio is going to be covered by Classici. So that is your day-to-day by the glass. The next tier up is composed by the Cru line. There are 6 packs. There's Nova Serra, Greco di Tufo, Radici Fiano d'Avellino, Re di More, Irpinia, Aglianico. These represent the best expression for the whites of the area, and they belong to in the wine list of the best, very best restaurants. These are mid to high tier wholesale cost wines. The Vesuvio line, as Piero was discussing the terroir and the difference between the coastal Vesuvio terroir versus the interior, these are wines that currently have had quite a bit of success in independent off-premise channel. And we have 2 wines, Lacrima Christi Bianco and Lacrima Christi Rosso. In the portfolio, you have a detailed explanation, bottle basics for each of the wine, and you have a breakdown of varietal characteristics as well. And then the Icon line is what Mastroberardino is known for the most. And to Piero's point earlier, there isn't just one Taurasi, there's multiple Taurasi, and each one of these wines has a meaning. Each one of these wines has a personality. Each one of these wines has a place in the list. And I'll leave it at this for now. Piero, I will stop sharing my screen and we can go into the conversation about the wines and we can revisit as necessary.
Yeah, thank you. So, as you've seen, we have different lines, and each of them, as I was saying before, has a little different concept. So the first that we will introduce is the Classici line. That is a line that is very important for us, for the family, because this is really the heritage of our brand. I mean, it's made of wines that come from the most important grapes that we have in the area. So 3 white grapes that are Fiano, Greco, and Falanghina. And these wines, the Lacrimarosa, the Rosé, and the Irpinia Aglianico, that come from Aglianico grape. So we have 4 different grapes for these 5 wines. 3 are the whites, a Rosé, and a red. And these are the very classical of our wines because I mean, they really go back to the roots of these wines in our family production. So if you look at the bottle of our Greco di Tufo, that is a very classical, the German bottle. This is the bottle that my father introduced for the white wines right after World War II. And so this is exactly what Greco di Tufo used to be in the 50s and in the 60s and in the 70s. So you have a continuity of the image of the product, even looking at the packaging. So that's why we call this line as the heritage of the family. In the Classici line, we use an approach to winemaking that is aiming at enhancing the freshness, the fruit of these wines. We talk about very important grape varietals, as you know, very important appellations. So they are always complex wines. They are not easy to approach. But in the Classici line, these wines are thought and produced in order to have a freshness and a higher possibility to approach, and also probably a little easier and wider range of pairing with food. So in all these cases, we've got wines that are released usually a couple of months earlier compared to the Cru line, and have a very fresh and fruity style. And of course, they still have the 2 main characters of the region, that are the sapidity coming from the mineral richness of minerals in the soil, and the high acidity that comes from the environment and the altitude. So in all these wines, you will have this characteristic, the very high acidity and this beautiful vertical style that comes from the mineral side. So Falanghina, Fiano di Avellino, and Greco di Tufo on this side, and on this other side we got the Lacrimarosa, that is the Rosé, and the Irpinia Aglianico. Fiano di Avellino and Greco di Tufo are the 2 DOCGs of Irpinia region. Falanghina is a DOC and it's produced in Sannio region, so a little north to the area of Greco di Tufo and Fiano di Avellino. For the Rosé, we have a little different approach. Lacrimarosa is another wine that has a very long history in our family. It goes back to the 60s. The first experiences of vinification of the Aglianico in Rosé with this kind of style go back to the late 60s. So my father wanted to have this very delicate expression with a very, very short skin contact in order to have very pale color and to have the fruity flavors that go to close to strawberry, the wild strawberry style, more than the extraction of the characters of the Aglianico when it goes through the flavors of a red wine. So it's a completely different wine in terms of style. It's a very original rosé with a beautiful elegance and finesse. This is a wine that for us has a very big success. And the Irpinia Aglianico, that is the younger version of our Aglianico range of red wines that has a little less concentration, more transparency, very delicate on the palate and at the nose, in order to differ the taste of this wine, to distance it compared to the big reds, because of course Aglianico, when you have a different approach to maceration, when you do an extraction from the skins that is stronger, of course you can have a higher concentration of flavors and a different style of wine, even in terms of fruit pairing. In this case, we have a red that is extremely pleasant, with a beautiful freshness, and with no wood contribution, in order to have this freshness and this availability to the pairing with different kind of food. So this is the line of the Classici. Then I would like to say a few words about the two wines from the Vesuvio area, Lacrima Christi Bianco and Lacrima Christi Rosso. Okay, these are, as Marco was saying even before, these are two wines that are very famous from the family. They come from the Vesuvio region, and some years ago they have been the best sellers in the US and also in Canada for our company, because of the fascination that the Vesuvio area and the legend of the Lacrima Christi del Vesuvio wine, the Tears of Christ, the fascination that they got through the consumers. So they were extremely successful, and we still have many people that, of course, remind the history of this these wines and these labels. That's why it's interesting to have them in the range, because you will find people that still look for these ancient wines that were celebrated as the most important appellation of Italy in the late 1700s and 1800s. Were very, very famous, because the Bay of Naples was the area in which many people from Europe used to spend their vacation at the time. Then we have the Cru line. Okay, in the Cru line we have again one wine that is produced from Aglianico, Irpinia DOC, and it's called Re di More. And then we have two whites. One is Radici Fiano di Avellino DOCG, and the other is Nova Serra Greco di Tufo DOCG. Okay, here we are going a little up in terms of style and research in the winemaking process. And while in the Classici line, we have an approach that goes to freshness, to this fruit that is, as I was saying, a little more approachable. In this case, we have a longer period on the lees, and this means that these whites have more complexity, have more width and texture, and also the salinity is a little more enhanced compared to the Classici line. And of course, they are a little more important wines. Even in the food pairing, they require a little more attention for the pairing. The difference is also in the viticultural side, because these are single vineyards. Radici Fiano di Avellino comes from the estate of Santo Stefano del Sole. Santo Stefano del Sole is the village of the document of 1735, where the story of the family started. And Nova Serra Greco di Tufo comes from the estate that is located in Montefusco. That is the most prestigious part of the appellation of the Greco di Tufo DOCG. Both of them come from a very high elevation, over 600 meters, up to 650 meters of elevation. That means that you have a very cold environment, a beautiful concentration of the flavors. So these are the two estates in which Fiano and Greco give their best. In the Classici line, we prefer to blend grapes from different estates of the family, as it was in the past. So the classici have this another link with the roots, with the heritage of the family, because at that time the complexity of our wines came from the possibility to blend grapes coming from different sides of the appellation area. Then in the late 70s, the approach changed a little bit more, because my father decided to invest in vertical on the possibility of expression of a single terroir. So from the approach of the multi-vineyard wine, that was the one of the 60s, of the 50s and the 70s, starting in 1978, he started focusing on different vineyards and trying to enhance the characters of each grape, working on different sites. So we had experiments of single vineyard winemaking from different sides of the appellation, and at the end he decided to produce different crus. Currently, these are the best expression of the two appellations, Radici for the Fiano di Avellino and Nova Serra for Greco di Tufo. Then we will discuss about other expression of this appellation, but we will be back soon on this issue. The same happens with the Aglianico grape. Here we are in the middle of the DOCG Taurasi appellation, but we produce this wine without the DOCG, because we are with the Redimore Irpinia DOC Aglianico. We want to give an idea of what happens if you are extremely rigorous in viticulture and in the winemaking process, but without giving a very long aging in the cellar. So in this case, we prefer to have a little shorter wood aging and to present an Aglianico with a little more freshness, with a little younger style. This is important to make people understand what is the versatility of the grape varietal. You've seen that with Aglianico, we showed the Lacrima Rosa, then we have, of course, the big Taurasi, then we have the Redimore, then we have the Irpinia Aglianico. All of them are very different one from the other. All of them have a reason to be there, a different reason, a different positioning. Each of these wine, we don't produce a wine just to produce a wine. We have a concept without each behind each of these wines, and without that concept, I would not produce the wine. There must be a reason for being there, and the Redimore is a great success for us. We call it a baby Taurasi because of this shorter aging time, but the wine is extremely interesting and has a beautiful softness and roundness. So it's even extremely interesting. I mean, I love to pair it with the Fiorentina steak, with the T-bone steak, with something that is not too complicated in terms of food preparation, but that needs a support of a wine with a strong personality. Redimore comes from a research project that is a selection of very ancient clones of Aglianico that are prephyloxera. So this is another important topic for this wine, because Redimore was the base of a very interesting research plan of recovery of some of the characters of the Aglianico grapes coming from the prephyloxera period. And these clones that were selected to produce these wines bring my father's name. They are Aglianico Antonio Mastroberardino, and will be used for the replantation of the Taurasi vineyards in the next decades, of course, because they have a very small bunch, very small berries, and they come to a perfect maturation due to this condition, structural condition of the bunches, and also give a roundness that not all the Aglianico clones are able to express. So this is a new frontier of research for the Aglianico wines for the future. And this is for the cru line. And then we have the Taurasi range. For the Taurasi range, the most famous wines from the Taurasi range are these three labels. Probably the most successful in terms of awareness by the consumers is this one, the black label of our Radici Taurasi. That is the label that my father designed in the mid-80s when the project of Radici started. The project of Radici in viticulture started in 1981, and the first vintage of this wine is from 1986. And the packaging of this wine remained more or less the same. Only the techniques of printing changed, but the structure of the label, the colors remained the same since then, since 1986. And we also have the Riserva version that is, again, very, very famous. Many of you probably know very well this label from the past. Some of you talk about the great success of our 1968 Taurasi Riserva. As you can see, the label is the same of the past. So the image of Taurasi, as I said, for Greco di Tufo, for Fiano di Avellino, the image of this wine remained the same during the decades. So the label of our Riserva has been for many years the most important message in terms of communication for our family brand in the world. This is the wine that has been selected for many, many years at the New York Wine Experience every year. You know that the New York Wine Experience, Mastroberardino is the unique label representing Southern Italy, apart from one or two wines from Sicily. From Tuscany all the way down to Calabria and Puglia, there's only one label, and it's Mastroberardino. During the years, this is the wine that has been presented and selected by the Wine Spectator at the Wine Experience year per year. In the more recent years, in some years they selected Historia, that is the other Taurasi, and in the last edition of 2019, it was the first time that they selected a white wine from our winery, that is Stilema Fiano di Avellino, but we will introduce it later on. So the third label of the Taurasi range is Naturalis Historia. This is another single vineyard, and it's completely different from the Radici wine. Radici comes from a vineyard that is located in Monte Marano, so in a very cold environment and a very high elevation, the same style of the two sites that we selected for the Radici Fiano di Avellino and for Nova Serra Greco di Tufo. So looking for the altitude and the cool climate. Historia comes from a different site in the Mirabella estate that is a little lower in altitude, goes up to 500 meters of elevation, but the main difference is in the fact that this is a very old vineyard that is over 50 years on the average of age of the vines. And so in this case, we have a vinification of grapes coming from very old vines. And so it's even very interesting to compare the style of these two wines. Radici is a little deeper, stronger personality. Historia is a little rounder, a little more delicate in the style of production of Taurasi. All these wines have an approach of late harvest. We harvest these grapes in the first half of November usually, because another characteristic of Irpinia is the fact that it's the last wine region to pick the grapes. Compared to all the other wine regions of Italy, we start with the whites in October and we finish with the Aglianico grapes in the early November. So in the case of all these wines, we have quite a late harvest, and then we have a long period of maceration that is about 25 days. And after this long maceration, then we have, of course, the wood aging that is quite long, a little less for the black label of Radici, a little longer for the Riserva of Radici and for Historia. But in all these cases, we have the character of a wine with a good concentration of the fruit and with a very deep and intense character. And I mean, this is the style that has been the success of Taurasi in this last 30 years, starting from the 90s. I'm saying this because before that period, the approach to Taurasi was a little different. In the 60s, the 70s, up to the 80s, Taurasi had a little less concentration, a shorter maceration, and so the style of the wine was a little different. And we will go back to this discussion later on, tasting some of the wines from the Taurasi range.
Piero, I'm gonna jump in and say just the one technical thing here to the team. Piero discussed the harvest and when the wines are ready. And what I wanted to reiterate is that we are getting all fresh vintages. So all the POs that are going in will be filled with 19 whites and all fresh vintages of all the wines. And to give you some context, the winery releases the new vintages sometimes at the end of March. So you can count on having a full fresh vintage and for a full year. So just the technical information for everyone.
Sure. Then we have a few words to dedicate to Villa dei Misteri project that you already mentioned. Villa dei Misteri project is a project that Riccardo introduced, talking about the visits that he made in Pompeii with my father. And it's true. Riccardo said that when my father used to go to Pompeii, even 20, 30 years before the start of this project, he had exactly in mind what he wanted to do. He wanted to replant the vineyards inside the archaeological town. In the early 70s, he started talking to the guys from the government that are in charge of the management of the archaeological town of Pompeii, in order to understand if they were interested in working on this kind of research, in order to understand what was viticulture 2000 years ago, what was the approach to viticulture, and what was the link between viticulture and the style of the wines that were produced at that time. So all this kind of research was in his mind since then. And when in the beginning of the 90s, we had a first change of the legislation in Italy that allowed us to start a partnership between a small private company and the government on the cultural goods. We started working with them on this plan. We sat with them a couple of years working on kind of an agreement between us, and at the end, in 1996, we were able to replant the first vineyard in the town of Pompeii, in the garden of the house of the Oste Eusino. This was a very small piece of land, and it was a kind of a lab in which in every row we planted a different grape varietal that was typical of Campania Felix of the Roman times. And we did the first experiment. After a couple of years, we were able to expand the program, and we planted some other vineyards around. We focused on the red grapes, and we planted some Piedirosso and some Sciascinoso, two ancient Roman grapes. Then in 2001, we had the first very small production from that area, and we produced the first vintage of Villa dei Misteri. From there, we went on working on this research. You will find on our website many information about this research program that I presented several times, even in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian Foundation. I had a lecture on this topic some years ago. And then we have another step of the project during the 2005. We started expanding again the implantation of these grapes, and we introduced the Aglianico grape in the Pompeii project. So by the end of 2000, we have a blend of 3 grapes in this wine, that is Aglianico, Piedirosso, and Sciascinoso. So the wine currently is a blend of these 3 grapes, and comes from a viticulture that reproduces exactly the approach to viticulture that was in Pompeii 2000 years ago. That means the same density of implantation and repositioning the plants exactly in the same position of the period of the eruption of 79 AD. So this is probably the most unique thing that we have in our recent plan of research and development in the winery. Of course, this is a kind of iconic wine. It's a very small production. We produce about 1,000 bottles per year, and it's dedicated only to the very top premium restaurants and so on, all over the world. So it's a very selective distribution. And then we have in the range, again, in the research and development side, another project just started recently that has already become the most successful thing that I have been working at in my whole professional career. And it's called Stilema project. And this is made of 3 wines. One is dedicated to Fiano di Avellino appellation. The second is dedicated to, again, Taurasi appellation. And the third is dedicated to Greco di Tufo appellation. These 3 wines are the very top wines of our range currently, have become the most awarded wines that we produce in very few months just after the launch. The first wine that was launched was the Fiano di Avellino. The first vintage was the 2015. The current is 2016, recently released. So the Fiano di Avellino was the first wine to be released last year and was immediately selected by the Wine Spectator to represent Mastroberardino Winery at the Wine Experience. Here the approach is a little different because in this case we are looking for the stilema of Mastroberardino family for each of the appellation. This is a tribute to my father career. Each of these wines is the expression of the benchmark of my father in his life dedicated to each of the appellation. So in the case of Fiano di Avellino, in my opinion, this style of Fiano di Avellino is the reproduction of the protocol that my father used in the period of the 70s, in which Fiano di Avellino became the great success, the most successful white wine from Italy in the world, and gave the awareness of Irpinia again after the long period of relaunch, after the war, after the renaissance of Irpinia wines coming from the destruction of World War II. Because probably some of you remember this, you must know that my family restarted in the 50s and the 60s with Taurasi. The wines came later, came in the 70s. The first success was Taurasi, and in fact, you still can find in many important wine lists, in very prestigious wine lists in restaurants in the United States, you can still find very important labels of Taurasi going back to the 60s, the 68, but also the 61 is still available in some very important wine lists in the US, the 71, and so on, many different labels from that period. So the success of Mastroberardino wines and the wines from Campania in the 50s and 60s was focused more on the Taurasi range than the whites. In the 70s, there is an explosion of the white wines. The Fiano di Avellino and Greco di Tufo became, very important, even more important than Taurasi. In the 70s and 80s, the whites from this region became more successful than the reds. So that's the period in which my father gave his best to these appellations. That's why both Fiano di Avellino and Greco di Tufo in the Stilema range reproduce the approach to the whites of the 70s. This means that they are released when they are older. So we have now released the 2016, so 3.5 years of cellar before the release. For the Greco di Tufo, we just released the 2017 in these weeks. It's been just launched. And this means that these wines have a great complexity. They are very, very interesting, but also there is a different style in the winemaking process. Going back to the Classici, you remember that we discussed about the freshness and a little more approachable, talking about Fiano and Greco. But with the cruise, we talked about a little longer period on the lees, that is 6, sometimes 8 months. In this case, we leave the wines on the lees 24 months, 2 years. So you can imagine the complexity. This enhances a lot the vertical style of the wines, this salinity that reminds the sea, the oyster flavors. In the case of Fiano, we have also a beautiful fumé nuance that makes it extremely interesting, intriguing. And Greco has more, has a beautiful power, and you know, the difference between Fiano and Greco is always this. Fiano is more on elegance, and Greco is more on structure and also versatility compared to Fiano. Fiano is a little more austere as a wine compared to Greco. And the third wine of the three is the Stilema Taurasi, just released. This is a 2015, so it's the first experience of Taurasi, and again, completely different from the Taurasi that you know. Because in this case, we have a longer maceration. As I said, before this period, the style of Taurasi was the style of the 60s. So with the Stilema Taurasi, we are going back to the style of the 60s. That is the period in which this appellation became successful all over the world. This means that maceration is shorter, that we have less extraction from the skins, we have less concentration of the color, less concentration of the fruit, much more on the spices, and a beautiful finesse and elegance, much more transparency. The wine appears a little lighter and with a beautiful elegance. I love the style of this Taurasi, that is a revolution compared to the success of our Taurasi that are very well known on the market. But this is the style of Taurasi that I remember from my childhood. That's why I'm reproducing this different Taurasi, because with this new style, that is the old style of Taurasi, we will have again the possibility to show to the consumers what is the versatility and the potential of an appellation. Taurasi appellation deserves to express all the different beautiful things that has inside the terroir. It's not just one style. A few words about the viticultural side of Stilema project. Again, as we are going back to the 60s for the style of the red and to the 70s for the style of the whites, in this case, for all the three wines of the Stilema line, we are blending the grapes from different sites, from different estates. So the complexity is coming from the possibility to put different sites, different expressions of the terroir together in the same blend. And it's extremely interesting because it's a different approach to the appellation, and again, is a new frontier of research for the three appellations. So this is about the range. Marco.
Eccomi.
I don't know if
Fantastic presentation, Piero. Thank you.
I
Very
forgot
clear.
something.
No, extremely clear. Thank you. I think everybody has a much deeper understanding of the portfolio and the rationale behind it.
Okay, so we can go to a little tasting of the wines.
Yes. Team, we have selected one wine per tier, and Piero will lead us through tasting of three different wines plus a fourth surprise at the end. But we'll start with Classici Greco di Greco.
Yes. Yes, the first wine we are tasting is the Greco di Tufo from the Classici line. And as I said, this is the wine that gives, even in the packaging, a strong tribute to the history of Greco di Tufo. And this German bottle is the history of this wine since 1948, 1949, more or less. Before that period, the whites were in the Bordeaux bottle, and the reds were in a kind of Bourgogne, the big Bourgogne, like a champagne bottle. This is a Taurasi from the 30s, so almost 1 century ago. And so Greco di Tufo is in the German bottle. That is the classical image of our white wines from the past. And as I said, the wine is a blend of different sites, and has I'm sorry that I'm tasting by myself. I would like to join a big group with many glasses, but I can show you some of the characters and introduce this wine that has a beautiful freshness.
Our mouth is watering for sure.
So sorry.
Exactly.
But you know, the great Greco has this beautiful character, this nice structure that is similar to the structure of a red wine for a Greco di Tufo, that is quite unusual. This means that the wine is extremely long and persistent. So you can enjoy this wine with a huge variety of food, even with food that usually is not for a white wine, due to this its very strong personality. And the character of a Greco, I mean, the typical fruit flavors go to the peach and apricot, but what is typical of Greco is the finish of almond that makes it extremely distinctive at the tasting. And as I was saying before, in this case, we have the fruit that is extremely expressive. So I think that this is a very interesting wine in terms of didactical side of the tasting. I mean, if you want to have people understanding immediately what is a Greco di Tufo, probably this bottle is the best because you have all the characters extremely clear and clean at the tasting, because the process is simple and dedicated to enhance the first characters, the first flavors of the grape varietal. Again, saltiness. That is what I really look for in the wines that we produce, because this is the best way to understand the soils. In all these wines, we are looking for the character of the soil in the glass. Something that my father used to repeat was that Irpinia is a very complicated land. It's difficult to produce wines here because you are up on the mountains, small parcels of land, and everything is complicated up and down on the hills. But what is very important is to make people create a link in the memory between the tasting and the region. That's why I didn't want to do experiments with the international grape varietals in the area, because he said that we have to focus on this kind of memory. Our consumer, of course, is day by day hit by many messages talking about Chardonnay. And we are, you know, the very few people that talk about Greco or Fiano. Only my family does this job. And so he said we have to make people understand more and more what is the distinction of these grapes. And that's why he didn't want to work in blending. He didn't want to put a Greco together with Fiano and to produce a wine that was a blend of the two grapes, because he said, I need to have people understand what is a Greco and what is a Fiano. And they are different grapes, they are different wines, but I need to make people understand what are these grapes. Everybody, you know, talk about easier wines and wines that are in the middle of communication, but our challenge is to make them understand what is Irpinia, what are these wines, and to come in touch with the real feeling of this land. So Greco di Tufo has been the flagship of the region in the 70s and the 80s, and has become the most successful white wine of Italy for several decades. Consider that up to the 2000, Greco and Fiano were, together with the wines from Friuli, the only two regions that were considered the top of the white wines in Italy. The only two regions, I mean, that were able to send their white wines in all the region, and all the regions of Italy considered these wines as their own wine, their own white wines. Many regions have red grapes, but the important white grapes are very few in our land, in our country. So let's move to the second white. that is Radici Fiano di Avellino. Again, we are at the new release, recently bottled. This is the 2019 Radici Fiano di Avellino. In this case, we have a different approach. Here we have a blend of grapes coming from different vineyards. In this case, this is a single vineyard. As I said before, the vineyard is in Santo Stefano del Sole, 650 meters of elevation. And this wine comes from organic viticulture. And in this case, we have a longer period on the lease. So the wine has a little more complexity compared to the Fiano di Avellino of the Classici line. So usually in terms of positioning, the Cru line goes a little higher, even in terms of the scale of the restaurants that used to list these wines. In this case, we are positioned a little higher. And the style of Fiano is completely different. Here we got more delicacy, and the Fiano has this pear notes that are extremely interesting, but very, very elegant. Again, long and persistent. The personality is all there, but the wine doesn't have the structure of a Greco di Tufo. The wine has more delicacy, but also is a little more complicated in terms of food pairing. For a Fiano di Avellino, you have to be a little more careful to what you pair. And Fiano is a little more ageable than Greco. We are talking about wines that last for a very long time. I mean, even for Greco, we can easily go to 20, 25 years of aging, but with Fiano you can go over that. You can go over 30 years of aging easily. And we tasted bottles of Fiano that were around 40 years old, that were still expressing beautiful character and evolution. And what is interesting is also the color, because the Fiano has a strong resistance to the change of color. So this is another indicator of resistance to oxidation of this wine. As I said, in this case, we have the contribution of the lease, longer period. So here we have the enhancement of this salinity that gives much more importance to the wine and the tasting. And this length and persistence is really outstanding. I hope you'll have a chance to make this tasting soon, because I think it will be extremely important to share these feelings that I have at the tasting with the glass in front of you. Okay, then we go to the third wine, and we are moving to the icon line of the Taurasi range. And even in this case, we are showing a brand new Radici Taurasi, the 2016, not released yet. The first shipment will be made to your company in the next days. So the presentation of this wine today is a preview. So here we have our flagship wine. And this is probably a key that opens many doors and many accounts, because the level of awareness of this label of this wine is strong, and the success of this wine is important, very important for us. Radici has, as I said, has a longer concentration, so a longer maceration process that gives a higher concentration in the beautiful fruit nose. You have first of all the flower, the violet that is typical of Aglianico grape. Then you have cherry, but you have a lot of spices that is again typical of this wine. So the length again, and it's so wide at the nose. You've got some underwood nuances, mushrooms. 2016 is quite young for a Taurasi. I was showing to you the 68. It is quite famous. I also have a sample of the 68 special selection Monte Marano, that is one of the 3 specific sites that were produced in this extraordinary vintage. But I also have here this from the 30s, 1934, and let me tell you that I tasted one of these quite recently, a few months ago. I mean, all these wines are still extremely young. So what is typical of Taurasi is the possibility to look for an aging that goes close to 1 century in the big vintages. That is quite unusual for many wines, but for Taurasi, it's not something that shocks us that much, because it happens quite often to have a possibility to complete a vertical tasting with a Taurasi that goes back 70 or 80 years. I want to show you, make a comparison between the Radici Taurasi 2016 and our new way of thinking about Taurasi. That is the Stilema 2015. So here you have, I don't know if it's possible to appreciate the color and transparency of this wine, but yeah, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a glass that has more agility, a little more transparency, and the tasting profile that is completely different. If you, of course, you identify all the basic descriptors of Aglianico grape, but the approach is different, because you got less explosion of the fruit, and, as I was saying before, much more exotic style of flavors. And this research plan for us is extremely important, because we are thinking of what is going to be in the long run comparing these 2 styles of the winemaking, considering that the wines from the 60s and the 50s with this kind of style had a beautiful evolution and aging, but the wines that come from the 20s and the 30s have a completely different style. Consider that in the 60s we have 12.5 in alcohol. Before the war we have 15 in alcohol. The style of the wines from this period are 13.5. In this case, we are going a little lower in alcohol, depending, of course, on the harvest, but we are looking for this finesse and elegance more and more. So this is something that we will enjoy and experience together in the next years. Thank you so much, and I really hope to have a chance to do this tasting all together with in the same room.
Thank you very much, Piero.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piero. That was fantastic, and I greatly appreciate your presentation. What we're going to do now, everyone, is take a 10-minute break to allow everyone to use the restroom and gather yourselves, and then we will return in 10 minutes, and we will pass it over to Brian Cronin. So look forward to seeing everyone in exactly 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.